All right, how can we tell if there's people in the room too?
Oh, yeah.
We got 24 participants right now.
We do. Hi, 24 participants.
Hi, people.
Okay, I'm looking for. Okay, I'm just gonna keep it right there.
Okay, so should we wait till we get a few more? We have 37 now.
Yeah, I think we could.
Guys
wait.
are live on YouTube, just so you know.
Hey, everybody, all over the place.
Hi, YouTube and
Hello,
Zoom people.
Zoom people and YouTube people all in one.
Yeah.
This is like a social media buffet.
Yeah, this is a good experiment. Okay, 37 people. It's only 3:01.
Ooh.
Oh, there it is. Do you have a carousel horse in the back there, Natalia?
I do.
I'm very jealous.
Oh my
That's
God.
rad.
You guys have to
Is
come
it
to my studio one day.
Yeah.
Did you get that unpainted or?
Yeah, yeah. So I keep wanting to paint it, but I also love it as is. So I'm waiting.
Oh, I mean, I love your studio. Looks so awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
It just looks like stuff goes down in that studio. Like work is.
It does. Kid projects and adult stuff. It's fun. Not adult stuff.
Yeah.
Said it.
I
You
meant
said
like
it.
models
Yeah,
and drinking
can't take it
and
back.
having fun.
That sounds like
It's
adult
funny.
stuff. I think that's going to come back and haunt you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what's funny, I noticed that when we jumped on just a few minutes ago, that we're sitting here like, hey, kind of catching up. And Natalia, you're the only one who was actually working. You were sitting there like painting away, and I'm sitting here like,
I
So
was
I'm like,
painting.
the real artist is.
Well, my painting happens to be right next to me, so I can't help myself.
It's
Okay.
funny to see everybody's studio, and it's fun, and I love seeing your. I have another studio that's not here, and that's where a lot of my stuff is. And I've been meaning to. Do I bring everything over at some point? So I've been in this weird in between places between New York and I'm in Texas as well. So I don't know. It's like, to me, a studio is a really important place. I don't know about you guys, but like, I know when I'm in my studio, hopefully the idea is I go there and something switches on where it's
Yeah.
like time to work.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my safety zone from the screaming and yelling of kids in the house.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
maybe it's not that bad.
Greg, let me ask you, is your studio separate?
It's
From-
separate from the house. My commute is about 5 seconds across the backyard. And then
That's really good.
key entry, I get in, I lock it right away. And then I'm in my imagination station.
Ooh. And Natalia, is yours is separate as well, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm luckily a couple blocks away, so I can just walk here. I can be here late night without worrying.
Yeah, meaning
Getting
you can go back to the studio without a commute, which is actually
Yes.
key,
Yes, exactly. But it's my home.
especially when you have kids. I think there is that idea of going home and spending some time, but when they're going to sleep, I feel like I need to go back and start working and get back into the hopefully the groove. I know, and I would love to know from you guys does it take you a long time to get back into the zone? If you're ripped out of it for whatever reason, somebody comes by, kids or whatever, you take phone calls. Is it hard to get back into the zone for y'all?
Absolutely. It's that's a feat. Like your phone rings or like somebody just happens to stop by. It's like, okay, my paint's going to dry on my palette. I'm going to have to remix, re-pour, whatever. I'm out of my whole rhythm I was in, where I was in la la land in my head, not even knowing I'm painting. Now all of a sudden, like, oh, gotta stop. Oh, gotta go pick up the kids, which is fine. I love picking them up from school.
Yeah.
But then I get back in the groove after that. That's till 6. After that, dinner, hang out with kids, family time. And I don't generally come back in the studio after that. I'll have my iPad with me and my sketchbook and just sketch all night ideas and sketch out. I'll take a picture of whatever I'm working on and just noodle on it. Whatever I want to jump into the next day. So it kind of, my studio just moves to the couch at night and I just chill in there, talk with Jen, hang out. And that's it. After the kids are in bed or doing whatever they're doing, I go and do that.
That makes sense. Greg, what time do you usually kind of get into the studio?
Oh gosh, forever up until this week at 9:15, 9:30, like I'll drop off my youngest kid at school, go for a walk, and then come in the studio. But I just started working out now just because my back always hurts. And it's just like, oh man, I got to do something to get out and stretch and get in a good routine. So now I'll get in here about 10:30 or so and then work until 6 or 7.
Natalia, how about you? Is it hard for you to like get into your zone? If you get taken out of it for any reason, is it easy to get
in
back
a deep zone? Yes, it's hard for me to get back into, but I can always come back and like noodle, but it's never that deep, meditative, whatever painting,
Right.
if I was in that. Well, that's why they always say, like, even the science of time management and all that kind of stuff is you have to do one creative thing or one thing at one time at a time. So people will designate like phone calls for one day or meetings for one day, and then the creative for one day.
Right.
I used to just do everything at once, which doesn't work. Or I mean, just
really, well, it kind of just kicks into almost that ADHD thing where it's, I know for myself, I'd start ping ponging all around and I'll start thinking about a bunch of other things. And I know for myself that to get into that deep concentration, it's hard actually sometimes. It could take a good hour at least just to kind of ease your way into it, sort of to sort of wipe off the morning's mayhem or whatever, even that cup of coffee, like all that, to sort of sit down and start concentrating and getting into the painting. It can sometimes take a while. I've like listened to podcasts and scientific ideas of, how to break it down in a way where it becomes more of like it almost becomes automatic. And that's like a whole other like thing you have to follow that becomes another thing to sort of get into. And it becomes really difficult. But I know once you're in there, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. It's like you got to trick yourself sometimes into it. Like I'll start like editing a video and then just like kind of just move back. I'm like, okay, look, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go do that highlight. And I sneak into it. I'm like, ha, tricked you. You're painting now. And I'll just stick with it for hours and say, screw the video. Nobody wants to watch those.
Okay. They always say the hardest thing to do is to start, which we have to like officially start this now, you guys. Okay. It's 3:08 and there's like over 50 people here. So that's good.
Oh.
Yay. Okay. And probably more on YouTube. Okay. So welcome to Trekell's Shop Talk with Greg Simkins, Craola, and Tony Curanaj.
Sub.
Oh yeah. Sub. Is it sub D or just sub?
Sub. Yeah.
Sub. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. And I'm Natalia Fabia. I'm going to help ask questions and stuff. Okay. So one of the first things that we want to know, and both of you guys are just such amazing, talented painters, graffiti artists. How the heck did you guys meet, or how did you know each other?
I remember when we first met. You probably remember it too, in New York. Yeah. I had a show at Joshua Liner Gallery in New York, and you came up and introduced yourself and said you were sub, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you're one of my favorite graffiti artists of all time. I started probably gushing like a big baby. Like I remember like picking up old graffiti magazines, and I was always looking at his stuff and Sess's stuff. And I was like, damn, this guy's at my art show. How sick is that? And you had Bill Plimpton with you, I remember.
That's right. I was with Bill Plimpton.
Because you guys are from the animation background also. Yeah,
Bill's a legendary independent animator from like when it was barely a thing.
Right.
So I know that when I talked to Bill about your work, and I was familiar with your work for years because of you being Craola. And that was the point, in Craola meaning as your graffiti alias.
Yeah.
And it was about the time when pictures were really getting passed around a lot. And this is right at the cusp of when magazines started, like independent graffiti magazines were coming out. So there was all these people taking pictures of graffiti for years and compiling all these photos. And now they were like a little older and they were like, well, I can make a magazine and start like shopping it around. So I remember seeing your stuff and being jealous of the name. And I was like, oh, how did he? It's such a great name. And I like distinctly remember being jealous that you thought of that name and I didn't. And the spelling of it, you know?
Yeah, but your name's Sub. It's like Sub and Subways. It goes hand in hand with graffiti. So it works. Mine's a kid's toy, and a toy isn't a good thing to be in the graffiti world, man.
Very good.
That is one of our questions is, Greg, are the crayons named after you?
Oh, yeah, I wish.
They are.
Yes, they are.
100%
I think
they
they've
are.
been
this
around for
package.
a while. You're not that old.
No, I'm not that.
But one thing I remember when I saw your work being passed around in photos and everything, because I grew up in New York and you were in LA. And when the photo exchanges were happening across the country, I remember that there was a fair amount of character work. And I was like a character guy in that age when, you know, in the late 80s, well, early 90s, when you were kind of, there was just like difference between, are you a letter guy or are you a character background guy? I was both, but I was definitely I was the background guy on a lot of walls, because that's something I cared about. That's kind of how I got into graffiti, because people would come and bring their black books and I always drew, so I would start drawing characters. So I just was, and I grew up on a lot of my influences were like cartoons and stuff like that, illustration. So I was instantly starting to do that. So when I saw your work, you had character work. So I instantly was like, oh, this is another character guy. And especially you being on the West Coast, there's a little bit of different style. And it was a style I liked a lot. So, you know, you instantly just stuck out to me. So when I did see that you were showing at, I saw your paintings though beforehand. I want to say, I think I saw it down in Miami at one of the art Basels,
probably
first.
Yeah, probably Basel.
I was like, is that the same Craola? Like, you know, and they're like, yeah, it's the same guy. I was like, oh, I did, like, you know, graffiti is now, you were doing canvases. And
right.
So when you were showing in New York, I was very excited to kind of come across and come around and meet you. And also because I just thought your paintings were amazing.
It was fun after that. Tony invited me to go to Croatia with him and Sess, and then a bunch of dudes from Europe for, what was it called? Ecstatic, like 2007 or something. It was the year my son was born, my first son. And we spray painted this giant wall out there. I'm going to put the picture up.
Pull that up.
It was really weird conditions to paint it on those scaffolding, which were trippy. And the kids are trying to still spray paint the whole time.
Yeah.
But the experience,
Mister, give me spray.
Yeah, give me spray the whole time. So we painted this wall up there, which was really big. It doesn't look as big as you might think it is. So it's like Sess, one, me, and you. You did the character and your letters right there. And then the whole thing was just fun because we got to fly out there and stay together. We were roommates in this amazing like palace, it felt like, but it was, you know, a hotel. And then you just got to tour and meet all these amazing artists. Like Balin was out there from Spain. He won the whole competition, obviously. That guy is unstoppable.
Well, it's weird that it was like it wasn't, I know
really
it was like some sort of competition, but we were just out there painting and
just for fun.
And I was used to running around at the time because I kind of grew up in New York, but I'm first generation. So I was always going to Europe. But when I got a little older, I was going to Europe on my own, and I would go there to study. Actually, I was going there when I got a little bit more well known in the graffiti world to do graffiti stuff. But then I would go off on my own and go to the museums, and I would go study old master painting. So I would go do all this, you know, legal and illegal stuff in Europe. But then I would take several days to myself and just go study old master paintings at the museums. And it was a pretty amazing way to spend part of your youth. Is like, you know, you're in New York City running around like a crazy person. Then you go to Europe, you do graffiti and all this skateboarding. And then I'd go check out old master stuff. So it was such a weird dichotomy of like, you're doing this and that. They seem like opposites, but to me, and even to this day, there's a similarity that is some people can't understand. But
yeah, but now you're like painting better than the old masters. I put you on a pedestal, man. I'm sorry, but every time I look at your paintings, I'm just like, how the hell does he get those details? And just like your brain like looks at light and shadow and color in such a great way and depth. I'm like, if I only had a bit of that. It's so
Well,
amazing. Like your compositions, it's yeah.
Well, I have a question that's kind of similar to that. Somebody on, I think, Instagram asked, so Tony, because you started out with graffiti but you were always interested in traditional art and like you said, painting in Europe. So when did you start your schooling for that? And then also follow up, how did your traditional painting education and work influence your graffiti and murals?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to be honest, I was always drawing and painting non-graffiti stuff. It just happened to be like I grew up going to punk rock shows and skateboarding, and that was part of the culture. So it's something it's still near and dear. I still love skateboarding. I still love, rock and roll and that. So it was a part of the whole culture. So I was an artist or wanted to be an artist. So I drifted into it pretty easily, but I always cared about a lot of like how to draw and paint. And I knew that when I would look at magazines or when I look at books, when it was at the time, I was told that I should really like abstract art. And in a weird way, I thought it was almost punk rock to not. Like, I was like, well, I'm going to go do the thing that I think is cool. And to me, it was kind of weird and outsider to be into like this beautiful old art. And so it just became interesting to me. And I just was curious about how to do it. Also, I started, when I was watching the, Bugs Bunnies and Tom and Jerry's and all the, Disney movies and everything, I'd get any information I could. And you would read that these, like the 9 old men who were like the great animators at the time, were studying with people who were studying with people, and they were studying with people who came from like 19th century French academic painting or something like that. And they were creating this whole new form of art in a very punk rock way. Like they just created art, this new form. So to me, I was always just like interested in this. You do it because it's amazing and it's beautiful, and you go into this, you go down the rabbit hole in so many ways. So I was always doing that. So even though you get a little older, and the adventure, the insanity of graffiti and going out there and doing real graffiti, going out there and doing the illegal stuff at the time, was so much fun for a young kind of wild kid that I kept doing it, but I was starting to develop my taste in art, and I knew that I had to do this other thing. And also I went to art school, and I was like, well, they were like, what do you want to study? And I was like, I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't know what fine art or anything was, because I went to the fine art department and it didn't look like anything I wanted. So like, you need to go to the illustration department. So I went there and I was like, because that's something I was familiar with, because I grew up I remember seeing like Norman Rockwell paintings. I remember seeing J.C. Leyendecker stuff. I just didn't know his name. Maxfield Parrish, all these like N.C. Wyeth, all these people, the golden age of illustration. So I was like, that's what I want to do. Not necessarily
graffiti artists in school too, or was that kind of rare?
There's so many. Everybody was a graffiti artist. I went to School of Visual Arts, for college, and like there was a ton of people who were like graffiti artists. Even people who were just like they knew about it. They did it a tiny bit. They didn't get deep, and they didn't go as like my colleague, my friends and I, and the people we looked up to. A lot of the New York writers, the old school New York writers who were doing the trains, and they were bombing and doing all, like the stuff that to this day, I still just think it's awesome, So when I went to school, I did illustration. Then I ended up working in animation for years, and I ended up working for Disney and MTV when in the early 90s first, and then Disney, and developed a lot of the look of the 90s, like MTV era. That was a lot of me and some of my friends who were doing that kind of street looking stuff, But then when I did the Disney stuff and worked on shows, it's funny because I've met so many people, and sometimes they're more interested in like I worked on a show called Doug once, which was,
I remember that.
Yes. I get that. I have people who are
mayonnaise.
like, yes. And people are like, I'm so not interested in your painting. all I want to talk about is Doug or the Tigger movie or all these other concept art, the kind of conceptual art I was doing for some of the Disney stuff. And honestly, in hindsight, it was an amazing introduction to like how to be a professional. Because once I kind of left that and started restudying classical painting, I went into it with more of a like, I need to work really hard at this. And I knew what it was like to work hard and not be like lazy about stuff. So I ended up studying again with this artist called Jacob Collins and this amazing artist, Jacob Collins, a dear friend of mine, fantastic teacher and artist in the late 90s, I believe. So I actually quit everything. Quit movies, quit everything, TV shows. I was like, I just want to be a fine artist, because then I realized what I wanted, which is to be a fine artist and not necessarily work commercially. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the crossover. Like, I mean, I feel like we had so many similar like interests, especially with skateboarding, punk rock music, and all that stuff growing up with graffiti. And also me, I'd sneak off and go to the Getty or stuff when my friends are out painting. I'm like, I'm going to go up here and hang out. Or I just remember a point in time where I cut off a lot of my friends I partied with just to get down and serious and just like, all right, I had an apartment that I turned the whole thing into an art studio. I'm just going to work. I'm just going to make art. I'm just going to do this. And they'd be coming around the house. Hey, we're going to this punk show. I'm like, I'm just going to paint. Like, what's wrong with you, man? You're not fun anymore. And I just buried nerd. I just dug in and just really pushed myself and just learned shit. I'd hang out with dudes. I just had tons and tons of books of artists. Like my buddy Nato, he was like a art encyclopedia. He would take us, we'd go bombing, we'd go paint spots and yards and do big productions at night. And then the mornings, wake up, look at books, just go through. He had such a vast knowledge of artists and stuff. He's the one who got me into like Line Decker and all those guys. Mm-hmm. And he's like, check this shit out. And I was like, oh man, how come I don't know about any of this stuff? I'm like, I'm going to art school and I'm not learning shit, because I wasn't going to class. I was at Long Beach State and I was basically ditching class, hanging out with my now wife and just going to go surf like the Huntington Cliffs on lunch breaks and then hurting myself. And just, I never went to class. I got by because I knew enough to get by. And then I'd go spray paint shit all over town and then show up and pass my classes. So I was a bad student, but I was very dedicated to art. So that's where I differed, because I was just like, I was a little bit crazier back then, but I just only wanted to make art. And I didn't like the way they were doing it at school because it was boring as hell. It was way more fun doing punk rock flyers and spray painting walls and just, running around on the freeway and getting chased. That stuff was more fun back then.
What's funny is that when you brought it up, the way the idea of the way we grew up on completely different sides, different coasts, but
skateboarding
the version of that. I think I'm not, I might be a couple of years older than you, but like I did the same thing, like almost verbatim outside of like going surfing and going to the beach as much. But like we did the same. We did flyers, we did record covers, even like in middle school and you do like back of jean jackets or like stuff or Slayer stuff or something on the back of jean jackets.
I was doing Misfits on the back of jean jackets for people.
Yeah. But it's amazing that we have this, and I've found this in a lot of travel, that I would meet people from completely different cultures, and we had this like weird similarity, and it's you find your people,
right.
And I know that when there's certain people I come across, and Greg, and this was like instantly when we met with you and I, is like I knew this guy would be like, this guy would have been my friend like now, or if we met 15 years ago.
For sure.
So I always thought that was interesting, especially when you meet artists, that there is an understanding. Like when we were talking, even before the cameras went on, there are certain things you all were talking about, and I was like, you didn't really need to explain. I just knew what you were talking about. I was like, yeah, totally. I know what you're saying.
Right.
And I think one of the things that is really important is finding a community. We're very isolated in what we do by default of what we do. But I think when we're not, it's really nice to have this like community of artists and people who kind of just get you without you having to like explain too much.
That's like, I think like that's true. And it's like when we were younger, we broke off into crews, right? Like, especially in the graffiti world, like I was in my crews, I'm still in them. But now since I've chose this path of work, I'm in my studio by myself all the time. And when I'm able to sneak out of here and go spray paint a wall, I go and hang out with my crews. And it's mostly to reconnect and have that feeling again that I had when I was in my teens and just like, oh my gosh. And like in like 20s, whatever, like earlier when I was hanging out with those guys every day and we're just plotting and going, running around, you get that sense of community, like with people that are like-minded. And then it's just weird, like looking at that now and then looking at this, which is so different sitting in here and just painting. But my mind was always going off into La La Land, even back then. They'd even tell you, oh yeah, you just get into a black book. And then you wouldn't see him for a couple of days and you come back with a 2-page spreader. Like, what? I was like, I had to do a good job, you know? Let me see if I have any pictures of black books.
Yeah. I got to start putting up some pictures. Natalia.
While you guys look for pictures, I'm going to ask another question.
Sure.
All right.
Okay. This is actually speaking of punk rock from my husband asked this.
Ooh, the best.
From Jay Finley. Okay. For both of you guys, what point did you recognize your own skill level? You were just talking about that, and begin to dedicate more time or full time to your craft?
Ooh, I have a good quick answer. I'll try to make it fast just because Jay asked it. And I know Jay will know this guy. So we had a family friend named Mark Vidal who always saw in me that I could do art pretty well. And I just had started my courses at El Camino Junior College doing art classes. And I was going to be a veterinarian. So I was going in that direction, but I took this one art class. My teacher's like, oh, you should be doing this. Then my buddy Mark, who went by Earl Liberty, he was in the band Circle Jerks. I didn't know what that was growing up. As a little kid, when I met him, I was like 8 or 9. But of course, I knew who he was by the time I was, 18 and starting college. But he was working at a baseball card company in San Diego. He said, Greg, in his big, deep voice, you're going to come down here and stay at my pad and draw up your street scenes. We're going to make pogs out of them. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, I get paid for that? He's like, yeah. So I went and crashed out on his couch for 2 weeks, drew street designs, and he made pogs out of it. And I got my first check for 10 grand, something around that.
Wow.
At 18, I'm like, Dad, I'm switching majors. I can draw animals. I don't need to work on them or anything. So that was like the first instance. I'm like, oh man, there's more to this than just me like running around and tagging on stuff. I can actually push myself and, make a career out of it. So it's thanks to my good old buddy, Earl Liberty. I just call him Mark. So if Mark's listening.
That's really cool.
Could I ask you a question, a follow-up to that, which was a great question, by the way. What was your main influence? Like when you got to that point where you kind of knew what you wanted to do, what was the thing that got like, okay, I'm going to make art now. What is that? Outside of, you're just talking about the pogs, but like, I want to start making my
I was never not making art. I've been drawing since I was like 4, and there was never not a pencil in my hand or a marker in my hand. I'm sitting in class, I'm doodling. I'm coming home from school, I'm drawing in sketchbooks. I'm trying to.
What were you doodling?
Like, okay, comic book characters, things in comic books, cartoons, definitely cartoons I was watching. Gosh, I remember I had an Usagi Yojimbo comic book, and I just found these little drawings. I redid the Samurai Rabbit, who was featured in a bunch of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff. I just started collecting randomly those comics. I would sneak Heavy Metal magazine, which my mom and dad weren't allowed to know I had because they would kill me. And I was trying to draw the stuff I saw in Heavy Metal magazine. So stuff like that, Simon Beasley, Boris Vallejo, all that kind of stuff. Fantasy art. I was really into fantasy art. And, until I found like the pop surrealists. And then we had like a Salvador Dali coffee table book, like a lot of families had. And I got into the surrealists through that, like Magritte and all that kind of shit too. So I just always had art around me. I was always drawing and coming up with ideas and drawing for my friends. Friends were having me draw them tattoos and all that stuff. Yeah. I was like, cool. That was my thing, but will I ever be able to make a living out of this? And I really like animals. So it was kind of like always weighing what I was going to do, but the art just sucked me in and said, no, you're going to do this.
Well, I remember having a conversation with you and you were bringing up Watership Down by Richard Adams and C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the whole like Narnia thing. Both, and I know that you were like, those are 2 very influential books that seems like it's still not guides you, but I could see it still, like that beautiful imagery that I got as a kid. When I look at your work, I feel like it's almost, it comes from this kind of place of wonderment, you know?
Yeah, that stuff is absolutely still there. Like even today, I read a lot as a kid, and now it's like today I had to sit and I wrote like maybe 5 pages, just some weird story popped in my head, just something that I could relate to a painting. So I'll just sit and write storylines, ideas, but it all these stories start as like a portal to someplace. Think of Alice in Wonderland, Phantom Tollbooth, Narnia, like the hero's journey that happens once you enter this weird world from like your normal, chaos of your own world. Like everything I read as a kid, stories like that have worked their way into my paintings. So yeah, I wouldn't put any shade on that. I think Watership Down and C.S. Lewis and many other authors, just, the whole Three Musketeers, all the Alexandre Dumas stuff. I've read all that as a kid. I was reading a lot as a kid. So those books got in my head. And now I just listen to audiobooks of that stuff while I work.
Okay. I'm sorry, one just to follow up on that. Does the hero's journey still?
That's probably what every single one of my paintings has been about the last 14 years.
It's about the hero.
Yeah. And it's the world, the outside I made is my version of Wonderland and Narnia and all that stuff. So I'm putting together groups of journeymen going out and getting into trouble and trying to find their way through the outside. So that's basically everything I've painted for the past as long as my son's almost 15 years. So
Wow.
That's great.
I love it. Wait, now you have to answer, Tony.
Yeah, your turn.
Oh, so wait, just so people who are just tuning in, what was the question again?
Yeah, I was going to say it anyway. At what point did you recognize your own skill level and begin to dedicate more time to your craft?
So I think
could be
a lot
recognition.
of
Anytime you got recognition
Yeah.
or anything that you felt like this is my path.
I would be lying if I said that really early on, when I was able to draw stuff that other people couldn't draw, that it didn't fuel some sort of, I want to do this and I want to get that like dopamine drip, like thing back. It felt really good for people to be like, that's amazing, when you were like a really young kid. So I was able to do certain things very, very young that other people couldn't do. But most of the people I ever come across that do great work have the same story. But I think once I knew that I wanted to be an artist, and I always knew I did, but of course, when you're growing up, you're doing multiple things, you're exploring the world, as a kid, and seeing what sticks and what doesn't, to sort of make you. But when I started really getting concerned with wanting to be a good technically, because I started realizing that's something I needed to learn. People would always say, and now that I'm older, when I meet people or lecture or something, and people ask me questions like, what inspires you? I was like, there's a lot of things that inspire you. Well, what do you do when you don't feel inspired? I go to work. I go in my studio and I work. But I knew that in the beginning, I needed to, again, back to the old masters, there was a bar that was so high, and it just dawned on me that I was like, that's what I need to sort of compare myself to. Not that I want to paint like them, not that I can paint like them. That's like an impossibility. But I just knew that here's a standard that I can at least check to. So I wanted to get good. And to be totally honest, I think hard work, a lot of dedication, ended up being more important than I ever thought. You think in the beginning, you get really good at this thing technically, and then that's it, that you're a great artist. And that's just not it, unfortunately. I know people, I've had students who were really, really talented and they didn't work that hard. And I've had students who were less talented, but worked their asses off. And those people got better than the ones who were really talented and didn't work hard. So once I knew that I was able to do something, I realized that I had to work harder at it, because I needed to dedicate my time to working hard. And once I figured that out, and I'm still figuring out, and to be honest, like even now, I'm only now getting to the point in my as an artist that I'm starting to like maybe really not worry about technical stuff. Like I think it was so, I was so like into it that it kind of wrapped up my work. And it maybe the last 8 years, I started really distancing myself from being so concerned. I still want to make a good looking painting, but I started distancing myself with like, that's what it's all about, to like, what am I trying to say? And I think that's something that I'm still figuring out. I have a long way to go. And I think we all do. But I think it's like, as you mature, you start realizing that there's just so much that I need to figure out as a person and not as a technician. Does that make sense?
There we go. Yes.
I'm putting some of your paintings up here just so people can see.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
You have a better grasp of
love
some
this.
of that. That's something that I know at some point we're going to get into, and this is something I really, really want to get into. And honestly, Natalia, I really want to get your opinion, your comments on this. I'm sure a lot of people here want to get into process.
Oh, I love that.
I know people are dying for process here, and I can't wait to find out how you guys approach a painting from beginning to end. Not only conceptually, but like how you approach it. How do you
That
paint
is
it?
one of the questions. If you guys want to ask that, Montana Raven asked, I think for Greg, or for you too, though, I'd like to know Craola's process from start to finish, including reference photos. How does he put that all together?
I'm right there with
from Tony. I want the same answer, the same question.
Okay.
You want me to? Okay, my start.
And you can show, this is a great time where maybe you guys can show work too, if you want.
I can't sit and scroll.
Scroll and talk is hard.
Yeah, scrolling and talking is hard.
Actually, if there's somebody else who's there, like on, because who can scroll, let me see if I can even. Actually, if somebody's there, could scroll through some of your work, because your work is just such a fan.
I'll go. You want to show painting? Probably paintings then.
Yeah.
Yep. Paintings. I have a folder there that says paintings. So my starting process is always the same. It starts with my sketchbook, and I will sketch. I have it with me all day. I have my usual focus times in the morning, having coffee, hanging out with the kids, or at night after I'm done working. And I will draw any kind of imagery that's just dancing around in my brain. Maybe I'm thinking about a storyline or something, and I'll just start drawing characters as loose and just messy as possible. I never, ever try to put a really sharp sketch together in my sketchbooks, because I want to have room to play with it later. And then later on, if I get into the studio, I'll take a bunch of pictures of it and of the different sketches. I'm like, oh, I want to expand on this. I want to do that. Or I want to throw this up into like a certain size canvas. And I will throw it in either Photoshop or Procreate, and I will throw it the transparency, so it's like at 10%, and I'll just start redrawing it and redrawing it and redrawing it. Say I have parrots in the piece, and I've just sketched out my parrots. I'll start looking online for photos of parrots, just to kind of guide me and where the patterns go, the proportions, what the coloring looks like, and I will look at them, and I'll just try to incorporate it into my sketch and make them look more parody.
So cool.
And then once I finally get the full composition together, I will size it right. I'll either grid it, project it, or do a Craola paper, transfer, or a little bit of each and transfer it onto the canvas, which is usually toned with like a sienna or something.
And you're working in acrylic, right, Greg?
I work only in acrylic. Yeah, it just was what I transferred to from spray paint. It dried fast like spray paint, so I just got used to it really fast. And then I just started.
People have asked if you ever work in oil. So
I have an oil setup, and I only used it 2 summers ago when I had a minute, and I started messing around with. I did a painting of a hornbill and a skull just to practice with it, and I liked it a lot. But then I had commissions, and I was like, oh, I got to get back to work on these and knock them out. So I never really revisit my oil stuff. But maybe one day. I just really enjoy, I'm still learning with the acrylics, and it's like every painting I'm trying to teach myself something new, and it never gets old. It's always fun to learn and push myself with it. So
a little Craola sign right here.
Oh, that's my wife. Yeah, that's her hand. She has that as her wedding ring, under her wedding ring. Cool. And I have that tattooed on my forearm.
Love it.
So when you're painting, and because I worked in acrylic when I worked in animation, but I don't remember, it's been so long, but I don't remember ever being able to get it to look, I mean, your paintings look like oil paint. How do you keep the paint wet? Because there's so many, there's so much form painting that you're doing, which means that when you're painting the form, you're going from light to dark, and how do you get it to sort of stay consistent and wet, that it's not drying, you're not just doing wet paint on top of dry paint?
Well, I'm not painting it all wet. I want it to dry. I'm even speeding up the dry time. I'm blow drying it.
Are you doing transparent layers?
Yes, transparent layers and washes. I paint really messy at first to get my form down. And the only thing I'm usually really trying to keep wet when I'm working on is backgrounds. And I use this mixture of Nova Color acrylic retarder and slow dry liquid of 50/50. Mm-hmm. And I use that medium a lot on backgrounds, and it works like a charm to keep things wet. And I'll use a little bit of it.
How long does it keep it open for?
Maybe 5-10 minutes. Not as long as you would with an oil painting, but I don't know. Like here's the thing. For me, that's a long time, and I don't know the difference. Wow. I don't know what it's like to do an oil painting like that because I don't do them, and I never got used to them. I never really did them that way. So I'm not trying to make my paintings look like oil paintings. I'm just trying to make them look like how the paint is letting me use it, if that makes any sense. I'm not attempting to make an oil painting. I'm just trying to make it look like how I see it in my head. And
so what is that on the screen right there?
Those are pictures of fish and sharks and parrots, probably, and eels and lemons. Just anything I'm going to be painting, I'll just pull pictures up so I can see what the highlights look like, how they react to light, and like just want it to look right. You know, if there's little pores in the white part on the lemon, I want to know that. I want to know how dark does that yellow, like little dots go and stuff like that. So I'll pull up stuff to look at.
Well, when you're adding all these elements into the painting, obviously you have to conceptualize everything, because nothing you're going to get on the internet or photo reference is going to be exactly what you want it to be.
Oh, never.
So are you doing a lot? Because your paintings are pretty big, a lot of them. Yes. So are you figuring it out on the canvas, or are you doing a bunch of color studies and figuring out where the light is coming from and conceptualizing the form so they all fit together?
These days, I like to do color studies in Photoshop before, really rough ones too. I don't take too much time on it. I just want to know what colors are talking to what. So when I get to the canvas, I don't have to do too much guesswork, but I do leave a lot of things open for spontaneity in my paintings. So there is some guesswork, and I'll just get a white charcoal pencil, and just start drawing on the canvas. And okay, I can put that there, and I know what these colors are doing over here. That's going to talk to that. And I just throw it in there. And by this point, I can work out the color scheme, but I usually try to work out a basic color scheme beforehand and then kind of use it as a model to go by. But I got to be honest, I haven't done that every time, and I don't always do that. But for bigger pieces, I try to. Like this paint, I wouldn't make a color comp of that. I would just start painting because I see it in my head.
Oh, okay. So you're working in layers. So you do your drawing, you transfer your drawing.
Yep.
Either using Craola paper, or you're doing like I know for my own paintings, when I do a lot of drawings and I transfer my drawings, and I'll just hit it, the back of it, my tracing paper, or whatever I'm going to use, with charcoal or even oil. I do oil transfers, and we could talk about that later. But there's a certain amount, like, are you transferring everything? Because when I look at your paintings, there's so much in some of them going on that I'm like, is he figuring out all this drawing? Or are you doing things like almost a la prima right on the canvas?
Yeah, I won't transfer the whole thing. I'll dumb down the drawing for transfer, just so I know. I'll draw a circle and write the word fish, just because so I'll know it's going to go there. I want the composition down, and I'll do just the bare minimum amount of lines to transfer. Or sometimes I only do transfer parts of it and just work my way from the background forward. So I'll transfer the furthest stuff back. I'll work a background out, and then I'll transfer on the background elements. And then I'll just, once I have like a basic relative form, I'll take the white pencil and start drawing on it and fine tuning things, especially if it's a big painting. And then I'll fix it, matte medium, and then come in and start painting. And then I'll work out where the next things go. Sometimes I'll just
when you're
stages.
When you're drawing in white pencil, are these are you taking the idea of it or the drawing from your sketchbook, or is this the first time
No,
you're drawing this element? Are you like, I don't know, I'm just going to figure it out as I go with the white pencil?
both. A lot of times it's already have the sketch on the composition sketch, my pre-sketch, and I know it's going to go in there. I just haven't drawn it on yet because I want to do the stuff behind it first. Because I'm always thinking in 3D, like there's things behind it, so I have to finish the whole thing, and then I end up painting over big sections of finished work, and people hate it. I hate that I do it, but I'm not going to change it because it's fun for me, and it's unfortunately it's part of my process. I'll finish a whole section, and then there goes those mountains. I'll paint right over them, and it drives me nuts. But I see it there, and I have to paint it there, or else the thing in front of it isn't going to really be real. And so then I'll draw it on, I'll paint it, and then I'll do the next section, and I'll go with
Actually, that was a question. Where do you get your inspiration of some of the backgrounds? Like the
photography. I like to look at just photos of nature. So if that
any traditional paintings too? Sometimes.
Oh yeah, I like the Hudson River School guys are awesome.
Oh, I love the Hudson River School guys.
But after time,
Church.
Freddie Church. And then
all of them are amazing.
Yeah, and then I is it Thomas Cole, one of those guys too?
Yeah, Thomas Cole was like the granddaddy of them, pretty much. He came over from England and really influenced. I mean, the Hudson River School was the real first like American art movement.
Right.
That was like the one that really started. Like there was always painting and good painting going on, but that was the one that was really embraced here. And it actually even helped create a lot of the country, because people were seeing these great paintings. They're like, that's out west. We need to go out west.
Oh, you can
anyway
see the drawing here.
Oh yeah, so you can see the drawing laid in there. Yeah. But that's not even the final characters aren't drawn in that yet. That's the stuff that was drawn to that point. And at the end, more stuff even goes in that wasn't even sketched in there yet.
So a lot of it is spontaneous too.
Yeah. Because when I draw it small, you never see like on a bigger canvas what could actually fit in there. Like, wow, now I got all this space that I didn't have when I was just sketching. Wow, this thing needs to go in there because that's part of this other painting, and they can talk to each other and be part of the same world.
That's just such a high wire act that, and it looks like it's weird because when I look at your paintings, there is this, like we were saying, otherworldliness, obviously, not only just because of the subject matter, but it looks just like it is a dreamlike state. And that's why I was so interested in knowing your process is like, do you handle it? Do you approach it in this, like when you're dreaming, you just don't know where it's going to go. Like if you're dreaming, they randomly just sort of shifts. And I was wondering if you even kind of approach your painting with that same idea of just like, let it go where it has to go.
Yeah, I have to. If the idea pops in my head while I'm on it, I'm like, I have to add it. I can't not put it in there. Like this piece right here, the rabbit season piece, that letter with the rabbit at the bottom, it has his hand on the letter. It says, go outside. And it's addressed to Ralph, who's my main character in all my paintings. It's like, wow, how did you have him in? Like I snuck my main character in the painting without him even being around just to tell those stories. But, this was like, here's what's painted on the wall. What's over that wall? We'll go outside and find out. That was the whole message on this piece. But I don't know.
Super nostalgic.
It was very nostalgic. This had to feel like an old cartoon.
Oh, there's Jen.
There's Jen.
And Jessica. Dabs and Milo.
Yeah, and Dabs and Milo. Yeah.
Those are amazing. So when you're, how long are you usually spending on one of those, like a typical size piece?
Oh gosh. Like on one of the 8 or 9 footers.
Yeah.
Months. And it's hard to nail it down. I never want to say the exact, because it's always different.
I know it's impossible.
Because there's some paintings, like the newest one I just did, Piper's Pass, has so many small different vignettes going on. It's the most complicated painting I've ever done in my entire life. Oh, watch this one. I animated this one. Here it goes. Here it goes.
Oh, whoa.
That's awesome. You even put the light in, like,
the light on his face and everything. That's wow.
Oh, I chopped that up into so many pieces to make just that little light on his face look right. Yeah, I was teaching myself After Effects. So I was like, all right, here's a fun project.
Do you have any NFTs?
Yeah, I did one, and I animated one of my paintings. I made this bird blink. It might be in here someplace, but this one was going to be one. I just holding off a little bit longer.
How do you have the time to teach yourself After Effects?
I don't. I just force myself. I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. When I used to work in video games, I used to work at Activision on like Tony Hawk's
cool.
Pro Skater and like all those Spider-Man games way back in the day. And I had the opportunity to dip in a lot of programs, get a very quick bare bones. So like when I revisit stuff, I kind of know the language. Okay, here's Piper's Pass. This is the one that the most complicated painting I've ever worked on. I absolutely had so much fun on every bit of it. I've been teaching myself how to 3D sculpt in Nomad Sculpt, and I sculpted that porcelain Orceratops to over there. You'll over below the Cheshire Cat. Yeah, I sculpted that in 3D and painted it in 3D, and then posed it in augmented reality in the studio just to see how it would be posed best on the canvas, just to give myself a funny little extra job that I didn't need to do. But I just said, screw it. This is fun. I want to teach myself something new.
Well, I have a follow-up to that. Do you feel like it helped? Because in a way now you're almost have a reference that is a little bit more
concrete,
designed to exactly what it's as if, because I paint from life.
Right.
And I set everything up in front of me. And if there's a fair amount of stuff I make up, but most of the stuff I do, I set up or I build, or I'll make it and then I'll put it in the setup and then I'll paint it. Do you feel like it helped? Is it something that you think you might do in the future where you're like, I'm going to start building some of these creatures to see what they would look like?
Oh, absolutely.
In a certain lighting situation.
Yeah, for sure. Like it was such a fun process and a practice. And now I can, who knows, one day I might output it as a toy because I'll have that file. And I just love the process. And I've always loved every tool I could learn. And even in that painting, the piano, I built the piano out of foam core and I lit it in the backyard and put different color lights on it just to see and get a good angle pose for it. So I'll make stuff too. Hold on, somebody's knocking on the door.
That's one thing I was going to ask him, is because there is a consistency that I'm wondering, that is he setting things up? Is he getting sort of stunt doubles?
I do stunt doubles. There's actually a character in this piece too. See that little spider looking with a gold head and a porcelain body just above the piano? Yeah. We actually have a toy of that we built for the stop motion project we did. I'm Scared, the movie. And so I'll look at him. Yeah, there he is. I even built him in 3D also just to have it. So, and then, if I'm painting like a beer bottle or a wine bottle, I'll set one up and I'll draw from that and use reference for the lighting and all that kind of stuff too. But then again, I can't find like a real armored seahorse anywhere to sit and pose for me and sit.
I think that's some of the magic in your work though, that it is made up. Like you don't want, like I'm kind of like Tony, I set everything up and I need to see it visually, but I'm so jealous of people who can invent. I mean, Tony, you could probably invent. I can't, but. Yeah,
you both can. Come on, stop it. I know Tony does. I've painted with him inventing stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's necessary as even somebody who paints from life. I think if you want to reference the old masters again, they made up most of everything, you look at it and it looks convincing, but they made up everything. And I think, my years in animation and illustration and all the cartoon doodling I did, so much of it was invented that I can't help but do that. But honestly, it's weird that, back to the question we had before, is it's something I'm actually more interested now. Mm-hmm. Like it, in a weird way, I almost want to revisit. I want to go back. Yeah. Now that I think I can kind of paint, that I want to go back to what started it. And I think a lot of that is invention, and see if I can mix the two. And I think that's going to be my new paintings, and I'm really excited to do it. I just got to get past a few more commissions, and then I'm like, but right now it's been a little tough. But yeah, I mean, I've always been so curious about how you just come up, because when I look at your paintings, I'm just like, there's just, I don't know to me, it just feels like there's so much thought. Every element has this like a lot of thought in it, and it just. I was just curious.
It all starts with those kernels of thoughts that go in the sketchbook. And it's like, how can I expand upon that initial thing? What can I add to it? and then just double down and just go, oh, wow, more space. Remember those other ideas from the sketchbook that fit with this idea. Let's put them together. So I've had background elements that is set in a sketchbook for like 7 years. And it's like, oh, I finally get to paint that. Like that windmill character in one of the earlier pieces. I'm like, well, finally a windmill riding on a dinosaur can be in one of my paintings. So.
But it also seems like there's a consistency in thought, meaning it doesn't seem just random, that it seems like there's a beginning and an end to the idea, where it's like, yeah, this is happening and there's a reason for all this. So I'm wondering, back to the beginning of when you started the idea of a painting, are you like, here's the idea without the elements yet, but this is the idea. I want it to be this. I wanted to do this thing, like emotionally to somebody.
Yeah. I definitely have like a beginning idea, and it's hard to, like this last show, it was all based around that Piper's Pass speech, which was basically a take on the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And my characters trying to safely usher these eggs over this treacherous pass and get from one side to the other. And I'm like, well, how many stories can I work off on that? And how can I incorporate my other characters into that? And then I just start, going into a daydream in a weird state in my head and just start playing in the sandbox and putting things together. And it just feels like that. Oh yeah, there it is. With shark eggs right there. And if you look at the capsules in the background, there's shark eggs.
Oh, wow.
With shark fetuses inside the egg.
Oh wow. Yeah. Oh,
so in the background of the painting, if you look, there's the eggs.
And I can see a little on the lower left, there's like a little drawing, like the kind of the sketch of it, the concept sketch.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, here's a question from YouTube, Greg. Is there something you've been wanting to produce or paint that you just haven't gotten to yet?
Every day. Are you kidding? All the time. There's more ideas than there's time. I've never run out of ideas to paint. I don't really get artist block, because there's just so many sketchbooks, so many folders full of, okay, here's the painting start. Here's the start for a painting, but I don't get to start them because there's no time. And I really want to move into just painting big giant pieces too, because you can really render them so much more and pack detail into characters. And it's I don't know. There's not enough time.
So great.
Let's hear Tony's. I want to hear Tony's whole story. Let's switch over to Tony's art and his. We've seen my dumb stuff.
Don't you see that?
Well, let me see. Let me see if I can jump in. When we were talking about process, I have a couple of like process things I could show you. Let me show you this one big one, and then maybe we can get into some painting. Mine might be a little bit different as far as my presentation, just because, like I said, I'm going to put this into preview, and I know it's going to be all jumbled up, but I'm going to share my screen with you. Hold on. See if I could do this. Preview or Finder?
I'm just going to mute myself for a second because the lawnmower guy's here.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so this is a painting. Like, can you see this? The drawing of a
yeah, it's like half
the painting of a drawing.
Yeah, I'd say.
Okay, cool. I got a really large commission from a collector, and they saw this painting, which was, I had this idea. I do the same thing. I would just draw stuff in sketchbooks, all random stuff, graffiti stuff, cartoon. I still draw a lot of cartoon stuff, but I was at the Museum of Natural History and I drew these, and I thought it was kind of awesome. I love rhinos and everything. So I ripped it out of my notebook, taped it to some wood I had in the studio. I just painted it, from life. And a collector saw this and he said, I want to commission you to do a big painting for me. I love rhinos. I saw that painting you did. I was like, oh, cool. So we figured out I had this idea of wanting to do a painting. Well, let me backtrack. He knew the other side, the graffiti stuff. So he knew I did very, very large things. And he goes, what's the largest painting you've ever done? I was like, are you talking about oil painting or like the other thing? And he goes, no, oil paintings. I was like, this big. And he goes, well, make me a big painting. And I just sort of threw out a number, 10 feet? And he goes, yeah, go ahead. And I was like, wow. So I had this idea, and let me show you the thumbnail I did for him.
Wow.
And this is actually, I met him through Joshua Liner, where we first met. It was Josh who in New York, who sort of connected us. So I did this really very quick thumbnail just to be like, I had this idea of wanting to do a painting of unfinished canvas. And again, the collector was like, I really like rhinos. I would really love for you to do something with rhinos. And I wanted to do something surrealistic. I wanted to do something that had a presence in it, but still kind of a still life thing. So I did this drawing, and he loved it. And he goes, go for it. Take as much time as you want, make it yours. So what I ended up doing is, let me get back to this. I ended up setting up this pretty crazy setup. I built it. I did all these sketches, and you could see me, you could kind of see the size of paint. I started this years and years ago, but I built the whole set in my studio at the time. And I went and got all these elements. I made stuff. I created things. I had this vision in my head, and I made this huge setup. And I did, I'll show you the drawing that I did before I show you the painting. That was the drawing that I ended up doing of this painting, and it was approved and everything. And the way I started it is that I worked this from life, and I started this a relatively normal size, and I would just keep blowing it up. So it was like closer to the 10 feet by 6 feet or something that the canvas ended up doing. So I ended up doing this very technical drawing that took me a really long time. And so much of it I was learning all those little things that I was doing for years and years and years of perspective drawings and working on my drawings and studying with, I went to this after Disney. I went to a thing called the Water Street Atelier, where I studied with some of I was just right place, right time, but it was like me and people might know, it was like me and Edward Minoff and Kate Lehman and Travis Schlott and Michael Grimaldi, Jacob Collins. Sarah Lamb. The list of people that were all at this one place is just, it's like the who's who of the people that I love and the type of work I do. So all that stuff was like, okay, it was like the wax on, wax off and Karate Kid. It was like, you keep on training and training and training. All of a sudden it's like, okay, let me see if I can do all this stuff that I've been trying to do for years and years. So I did the drawing, and then I did a color study of the idea. And the idea again was I wanted to have this rhino, of unfinished painting of a rhino. And I started researching rhinos, and I started going to the museums, and I started educating myself. And I do this a lot with my paintings, is I research a lot. So I started researching and rereading all the stuff, started reading on how endangered, I never knew how endangered they were. So I started becoming sort of obsessive compulsive about learning as much as I can as I'm working on this painting. So I started doing color studies, and I guess what I'm trying to get to is that I do a lot of prep work. So it's different. On a painting this big, I started doing value studies. So I started doing these small paintings to sort of set up my value, like what is the light and the dark. Generally, that's the thing that makes, if there was ever a secret to painting, which there isn't, but if I would ever say, is there a secret to painting? It's value, how light and how dark something is next to something else. And that's really great painting. It's just how light and how dark something is. Whatever the color, whatever the hue is, or the chroma, which is the saturation of the color, that can be adjusted. But how light and how dark something is. So I started doing all this prep work. So and here's a bird's eye view of the setup at the time. This is my old studio in downtown in Manhattan, and I had a loft, so I was able to go up there and sort of look at the setup to sort of get myself to understand. Here's another shot of it when I was working on the underpainting. So what I did is I did this drawing and I blew it up, and then I transferred the drawing, and I have several different techniques of transferring. Whether we were talking, doing a charcoal transfer or oil transfer. This one I think was a charcoal transfer. And then I usually ink it in black India ink, which is archival and it doesn't mix with paint. So you could do that to sort of set the drawing. And then in this case, I'm doing a brown underpainting to sort of set it up. It's very similar. You could see my value study, which was pretty small. so this is the setup, and like this is, I still don't consider this my first layer. This is my underpainting. So while when I'm doing that, I also start doing all these like little studies of every part of the painting. And honestly, I did so many, this is like studies of stuff I wouldn't even use. These were tiny little paintings. I would go to the Museum of Natural History, and I had this little pochade box that I would bring with me, and they weirdly didn't bother me. So I would be doing all these little oil paintings in the museum, and nobody bothered me. So I was able to do it. I was doing like studies of rhino heads. These are smaller studies, and I would do study after study. And what I was trying to do is I was compiling all this information. So when it was time to go into the big painting, like, you know, here's the original drawing that I ripped out of my notebook that actually got me the commission, you know, like you never know, but like, because I did that painting, I was studying the birds, like where the habitat of the rhino. I'll show you some here's my underpainting, but here's like me starting to finish and putting my first and second and third layer. I work in layers. So I work pretty opaquely, but I'll start working in opaque layers, and then I'll start glazing later on. But I pretty much go opaque. You know, I don't like, if I need to get from point A to B, I just go from point A to B. And then afterwards I start noodling later on to, you know, and it's funny because people were like, because I'm known for doing some really small paintings. And I was like, oh, this won't take me that long. I'll just use a bigger brush, but you end up just using the brushes, you know. And
what are your brushes? What brushes do you use?
It's this brand called Trekell.
The best brand.
And best brand. I love them dearly, and I know I'm going to grab some later on, and hopefully maybe even, you know, if we have time allowing, do some. Well, let me show you the. Here's a couple more like close-ups. I mean, You can see this is really close, and again, this is probably about life size, because the painting ended up being, you know, I think 10 feet. Here's some more close-ups, but let me show you the finished painting, and then I can break it down. This ended up being the finished painting, and can you see that? Okay, I don't know.
And that's 10 feet, 10 feet tall.
About 9, I think 9.5 or something like that. So you end up seeing that all those little studies that I was doing, and I had studies for every part of this painting. I didn't want to show you everything, but like, you know, because it informed me on all, and I was using the studies to put into the painting. So all my drawings that I was doing,
Charles Bard book.
The Charles Bard book, you know, all these little things, the idea of the painting.
There's a sub piece.
There is a sub piece right down here, if you could see that.
Oh, wow. Someone asked if there's a Durer drawing in the background.
There is the Durer drawing. So I use Durers because the way, apparently the story is, what Durer did is that somebody described what a rhinoceros was to him. That, you know, this was a story. I don't know if it was true, but they described it, and he drew what the person who traveled to Africa described. Because I think they actually tried to take, or they tried to, you know, I think they tried to like bring one to Europe, and it died or something like that in the boat ride over. You can even see right over here, you can see the original sketch that I did on a thumbnail, that sketch that got me the other thing that I was like, I actually did that with the person. I was like, I did it in front of him. He's like, yeah, that's great. Go for it.
It's super Inception.
Yeah. It was totally that. But what's really interesting and incredibly sad about this, the painting is called Oblivion. There's a dodo bird here. As I was starting to research this idea of the painting, I started realizing that this is a black rhino. This is a Western black rhino. And this is the white rhino over here on the canvas. And you can see that I made it so it was finished and here, and as you go towards the back, it's unfinished. As I was researching this painting took me it was on and off for about 2 years, because I had my daughter at the time, and the collector was so kind as to just let me take as much time as I needed, because I needed to learn how to be a dad. But what was so sad about this is that as I was like, so the Western black rhino was super endangered when I started this painting. By the time I finished the painting, it was extinct.
Mm.
So in the course of me doing this painting and being all of a sudden aware of what was going on, I saw the subject matter, it's gone. They're gone. And the white rhino at the time was right on the doorsteps of extinction as well. I don't know if it still is incredibly endangered, but it didn't go quite as far as the Western black rhino, which is gone. And there was like a few left at the time when I started the painting. By the time I finished the painting, they were wiped out. So in a way, this painting means a lot to me because I saw something in real time happen as I was researching, and not by accident, but just doing the thing I do, which is like care about maybe the subject matter, care about the painting, and go into the rabbit hole, that we all do as artists, to try to do a good painting, because I think art matters, and if anything, I think it matters a lot now because, especially with the news that's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Someone asked if this is a stretched canvas or wood panel.
it is. It's a stretched canvas. Yeah, this would be too heavy to do on wood, but it was. This is a stretched canvas. So one thing I wanted to sort of note is, for me, as I was doing the painting, I saw that there was like a space down here that wasn't working. And, if you go back to the original, I ended up doing some, but I felt that there's something not working here. So I had to like go back into the painting and figure it out. And I ended up redoing, kind of refiguring out this whole thing and refinding my perspective and here and
Genius.
kind of because I thought compositionally it didn't work quite as well, but once I put this in, I felt like it settled my eye. This was getting very busy down here with the rug, so when I put that in, I just feel like it broke it up enough, and it just gave it another cool element that I just feel like, for me, for my eye, it just made it much nicer visually for my eye.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's one of the ways. This is a more complicated way that I do process. I still do alla prima painting where I go right into the painting as well. But this is an example of how I did something a lot more technical, and I'll just show you.
Stretch your own panel? Some people are asking your own canvas. Some people are
I do. That one I didn't. That one was too big for me, that I didn't want to mess it up. So I had I believe Simon Liu in New York did that one, who's like the best, guy. So he did that. But before that, I was making my own canvases and everything. Now I just, I use panels so much that I call Trekell. I go, hey, I need some good panels. Can you send me some? And they're like, of course. But I'll show you one. Let me see if I can find something really quick. This is also something, a lot of it is just this. And let me share this really quick. Oops, wrong share, sorry.
Uh-oh, what was that?
Oh.
Well, I'll have
Okay,
you think about something. A couple people have asked, whenever you want to get to this, they really love your flawless surface. This one person said they've seen your work in person. They don't see a trace of brush strokes.
Yeah.
How do you achieve that surface?
Well, what I do also, there's a couple of things. The surface itself, like, I tend to work on pretty smooth surfaces, not super smooth, because I like a little bit of tooth, but I like it to be relatively smooth. And I'll like match up my brush that kind of fits my surface. So if it's a very small painting, like one of those that's like this big, I use very smooth. If it's bigger, I use a canvas with more tooth on it. Just, it needs to grab the paint. So I'll try to match up my brush to the surface. So I'm not going to use like a big bristle brush on a very smooth surface. I'll use a brush that has a little bit, I like brushes that give a little resistance though. Like I know the brush that we have over here, where are they at? The Crimson Taklons, which, that I feel like these have like a perfect spring for me. So that's very good. Very good.
Didn't you suggest that they make those?
I got my own Tony one. So
yeah, I only have a couple more. But what I do is honestly, it's the way I paint. And, I just stress the surface a little bit. It's not really the surface, it's the way you paint. I work so in a way, if I put down a brush stroke, here's my brush stroke, I'll put the next brush stroke down. So it's kind of doing that, right? So this little area right here, they kind of micro mix. So I don't really blend. And I know a lot of people see really, I do sometimes, but a lot of what I do is just I work in form. So on my palette, I'll have my mixture, and then I'll make a tiny bit lighter version of that. And then I put that down. Then I'll make a tiny bit lighter version of that, and I'll put that down. So it ends up being this, I know what we say a lot is like, if you're painting a round object, and at any point in this, if we even have time, I have another camera. I can always just set up and we can do like a quick demo or something like that and paint. But what I do is that if you think of a disco ball, if I wanted to paint a sphere, and you think of a disco ball, like every little plane on that is a different mixture. And I just very carefully put those down, hopefully. And then I might take a soft brush, like one of the, I've used like the Trekell mop or like the golden taklons, which are softer, and I'll tap it, just a little tapping, and it'll just sort of smooth it all out. But what I try not to do is, if I want to go from a light to a medium, put down the light and the medium and then blend it. I try to go light, a little bit, tiny bit darker, tiny bit darker, tiny bit darker, tiny bit darker, until I get to the medium. So I paint the turn. I paint the turn and the form, as opposed to putting a light and a medium and then squishing them together.
that makes sense.
That's like the most basic way I could do without really showing it.
A lot of patience.
Next question.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have another question. Where did it go? Okay. Oh, wow. Stunning work, Tony and Greg. Do you have any advice on how to achieve good likeness using photo reference? I do oil portrait commissions using photo reference. I use a grid, but I still struggle with exact likeness.
Both of you guys can answer that.
Natalia, I would love to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, that's a Natalia question.
I mean, I'll just quickly answer, since this is about you guys.
No, it's about you too.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's all about measurements and shapes. If you have the correct, value, actually, as you were saying, number one, but drawing needs to be right. So if your angles and your measurements are correct and your shapes are correct, it's just automatically going to look like the thing, the person that you are drawing. It's not in the details. It's in the big shapes. The details are just extra. So
Yeah.
that's my advice.
Well, one of the ways that I would kind of, when somebody asked me that before, when I first heard this, I was like, that makes total sense. If you're outside and a block away was a friend of yours or somebody who and you didn't see their eyelashes and their lips, just the shape of their head, their proportions, it's your friend. You don't have to see their eyelashes. You don't have to see the shape of their nostrils quite yet. You just know that the basic shape of their skull or whatever is instantly identifiable. And that's something when you're, the one thing about working from photographs that gets very tricky is that it's easy to be just copy the photograph. And you can't do that. Like a lot of times when people who work from portraits work from photographs who get a really great likeness, is that they're doing a lot of drawing prior to the photograph. So they're not overly influenced by the photograph, because the photograph is it's such a moment in time, and you're separated from the actual subject matter, that I think a little bit of structure and simplifying the shapes, like you were saying, is really helpful for getting those really basic proportional shapes that really, really make up the likeness. It's not the eyelashes that make up the likeness. It's how far things are from each other and where they're placed.
Okay, awesome. Here's a question for, I think, both of you. Is corporate sponsorship a plus or a minus for a career?
I could say easily, I wasn't even thinking about it at first, like, I don't think it's necessary for a career, but just the relationship we've had with Trekell, especially that I've had with them for like 13 years, like started really small and organically and grew into something that's really been great. Like I couldn't be happier having this sponsorship and, working with the paint company I do. I just like if it happens organically and it doesn't feel fake or forced, that I wouldn't take a sponsorship from something I didn't believe in. That's for sure. And I've had people try to, sponsor me for stuff and it's like, nah, not feeling it. Even if it was going to be a good move for me, I just didn't do it. So like only if it makes sense. And if the opportunity approaches, why not? Like look at
even the product, right?
Yeah. Like the product is just, it's great. So that's, you can't turn that down. I remember when I was first talking to Courtney about like sponsorships and stuff too. It was I was talking about the Bones Brigade and how they were a bunch of skateboarders they're artists who did tricks with a piece of wood. I'm like, artists are similar. We're artists doing tricks with a piece of wood, but it's a paintbrush, not a skateboard. Like, why not like have a pro team? Why not, have this group of people who are really good at what they do, represent them in some way. I always compare it to like the skateboarding industry.
Yeah, totally. I think it gets tricky. And I agree completely with you and have a similar sentiment. I have a podcast, suggested donation podcast that I do with Edward Minoff, and we get approached all the time. And a lot of it is just like, well, one of it, you don't want to be sort of, well, now I got to do this thing, for somebody, and that's okay for money. It's not going to be enough money. So why even bother? So if I'm going to take anything, it's going to be because I like it. I believe I use it all the time.
Yep.
So with Trekell, let's just say that was just an instant. Yeah, of course. I love your brushes. And let's like that works, that works. And I'm really glad to get, nice brushes that I could use for the thing I do,
Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, wait, and we can quickly ask Greg.
Yep.
So I don't know where the question is now, but how did that happen that your dad, did they show Trekell how to like make the panels?
Yeah. My dad used to build my panels and I used to stretch them, or then my buddy Graham Curran would stretch them when he was interning for me. And because I blasted my hands pretty bad, especially I stretched a 16-foot canvas once and I was just, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, But then my dad, when Trekell wanted to start making panels and stuff, my dad said, well, here's the way I've learned how to do it. And he, sort of did his research on how panels are made, looked at other panels and came up with a good process and took his process and showed them. And so it's just a really nice, like kind of respect thing. They throw his name on the back of the canvases and panels, like a, what's up, George kind of thing. And yeah.
So cool.
That's pretty much how it happened. Just like, hey, look at my dad makes for me,
Wait, what your surface is? Are you painting on gesso or is it on canvas glued to panel?
It's canvas wrapped panel with gesso on the canvas. So I gesso the canvases after they're attached to the panel.
Oh, so you're putting raw canvas on and then putting gesso on top?
But now I order the giant ones. I order already primed with gesso, like everything's done, and you can. Just like any, like on stretcher bars, you can take it off. Right now, I have to have that giant one taken off the 8-foot, 9-foot canvas, rolled up and sent to Australia. So that's going to be a process, but we're having fine art movers do it. I'm not touching it.
Yeah. So when they do that, do they restretch it? You're not sending the panel. They'll make a panel there.
Yeah, make stretcher bars and they're going to restretch it and frame it in Australia.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It keeps down shipping costs. That's for sure.
By a lot.
I'll be able to repurpose that panel too. I'll probably just get it and have them
stretch another one on top of it and just like go to work. When you were prepping your own panels with the canvas, how many layers of gesso would you put on?
Gosh, sometimes up to 5. I've done more. I've done up to 7 layers, and it depends on how smooth I want it to get. You know, like you said, different size, different amount of tooth, and there's plenty of paintings you probably see if you look online that, oh, he didn't put enough gesso on like a smaller piece or something like that. If I got all excited and wanted to start painting, and sometimes like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to paint on that wood that's all covered in tags. And I'll just do that too. Are
you sanding in between coats, and then the last one you finish it to exactly what you want it to be?
Absolutely, every time.
That's awesome.
So I got my power sander over here, and then I have my hand sandpapers and
you're going with a power sander.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It's a sturdy. Yeah. Oh, especially when I'm weathering, like on these newer paintings where there's like walls in it and they're all weathered graffiti. I'll paint it and I'll just sand through it, and then I'll paint it and I'll sand over it. And then I'll put matte medium to reseal everything down and lock the layer. It's like layer locks on Photoshop. So I'm like, oh, matte medium. Okay, I can paint whatever I want. And then sand it down again. And then like I've scratched it with scribes and stuff just to make things look like an actual wall that's been tagged on and repainted a bunch of times.
Natalia, do you stretch your own stuff? Do you get it?
No,
pre-made?
I suck at that. I get everything pre-made. Yeah, pre-made, or I buy rolls of linen, or I ask Trekell to make me specific sized panels.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll gesso it, or I'll gesso it myself, or add sometimes I'll add modeling paste or do a oil primer. But I'm not good at stretching anything.
I'm going to start making my 9-year-old prime my stuff. I just over it. I like to get stuff primed, but I'm going to enslave my 9-year-old and make him do it. 15.
Oh yeah.
That's why we have kids.
That's why we have
go
kids.
down those rabbit holes of like, at one point I was doing, lead priming on mine and being very like super.
Oh yeah. You told me straight. Didn't you melt something down? No, that was probably in a movie, but I knew you were talking about doing lead primer before.
Yeah, I'd probably melt down gold. I was using gold at one point. So gold leaf and gold. Natalia, I have a question for you. By the way, congratulations on
being fat. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, stop it. Maybe number 2.
Yeah.
Maybe number 2. I have
I'll
a question.
join you guys.
Yeah, I have a question. How has that changed? Has it changed your technique or your mediums or anything now that are you doing anything what are you doing different?
Well, the first time I was pregnant, I remember that's when I started using gloves and a air filter purifier, like a really fancy air purifier. So I've continued to do that. I never stopped that. But now but I mean last time as well as this time, I'm not using any cadmium paints, cobalts, and just been
what are you switching, like a cadmium red light? What are you switching it with?
Scarlet Lake.
Scarlet Lake. Okay.
At least from the research I've done, it says Scarlet Lake is not toxic. I hope that's how it is. I mean, whatever.
Sounds dangerous.
It'll be fine. People used to smoke and drink. Oopsie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I mean the Scarlet Lake. It sounds like a lake full of blood. So
Yeah.
Are you changing your medium?
Non-toxic mediums right now. The Sennelier Green for Oil stuff I've been using instead of any Gamsol or any thinners or the non-toxic solvent gels and stuff like that. And actually, I like changing up my mediums because then it forces me to do something different and explore. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
That's so great. I mean, I don't think I nearly experiment. I mean, I do because I get into the chemistry a lot, and I know I used to be a lot more into it. So I've gained a certain amount of knowledge, but I was really into experimenting and figuring out all the chemistry in it, and it was really fun. But it got to the point where I was like, it's taking up too much time. That I just need to know what works, make it very sound. I'm very into like longevity and archivalness and everything. But when I've talked to people who are in conservators at museums and stuff, when I have the opportunity to hang out with them, like I'm just, badgering them with questions and stuff. And it's pretty fascinating. I mean, one of the things, honestly, that you can do to cut down on any sort of archivalness is work on panels. I know we all love canvases that are stretched, and I still work on stretched canvases, but conservatives are like, you want to take out 80%, 90% of your problems, work on a stiff, on a rigid surface, that helps.
And I heard
it's the
aluminum
movement.
too, like all that will last longer than
Aluminum composite panels, diabond.
Okay.
Yeah. Those warp much less, and water doesn't get through them as much. So they stay stiffer longer. Not that you can't bend them, but like they stay stiffer longer. They don't get quite as influenced by moisture in the air. But you can even, when you go to the museum and you see like a 16th century painting and it was done on a panel on wood, some of them are like, they look like they were painted like not that long ago. And then you'll see stuff from the 20th century that was done on canvas and it's just cracking and falling apart and everything. And you're like, well, there you go. And the fat overlean. The fat
trucks are still around that he just painted on cardboard. So I know that was not that long ago, but I think
it's a different cardboard
Yeah.
than, the cardboard, like boxes now.
that's true. Yeah.
But anything you can do, whether it's acrylic or paint or oil, I would suggest know a little bit about the chemistry of the medium you choose, and just do a couple of things just to make sure it's around for your grandchildren or something like that. Like there's a few things you can do that will just make a huge difference, and like, why not? Just might as well just do this, and then you should be good to go for a long time.
Yeah. Great advice. Okay. Question for both of you, but mostly Greg, I think, or Mary Smith is asking, Greg, why do you tone your canvas the sepia tone before you begin the painting? And then Tony, what do you tone yours with if you do?
I don't like a blaring white canvas to start. It just kind of screams at me like the highest. I'm like, no, I'm bright. No, I like more of a medium. I consider it more like a medium ground to start on. And probably some smart person back in my history told me to do it. And I said, all right, I'll do that. And it's made like starting the painting much easier than having a screaming white canvas looking at me. That's just the simple answer. Tony knows all the technical reasons.
It goes back
I want to hear Tony's reason. This is better than mine.
It goes back to what he said in the beginning about values. You judge your values better, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So here, I'm just going to share this really quick. This is called, so I do remember before I showed you that brown underpainting.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I do a lot of times. It's called an ébauche. Can you see that?
Yep.
This is the underpainting of the thing. This is called an ébauche, which just generally means like it's a colored underpainting. It's very washy. Like I go into it almost like you would a watercolor.
Yeah.
Not quite as thin as watercolor, but it's pretty thin. And what you end up doing is that, in oil painting, you build up the lights. You kind of, so you kind of keep the shadows and the darks relatively thin, and you build up the lights. And when I do an ébauche, I kind of build up the lights because I go in so thin that I'm just like almost watercoloring over the thing. And what I'm kind of doing is staining it. So I'm just staining it. And my simplest way I can sort of express it is that from 10 feet away, I want it to look like the painting that I'm trying to go for.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that, hopefully you can do it in like just a day or two, so in a day, you're almost mapping the whole painting out. And the reason why, outside of you have a beautiful surface to paint on, is I wanted to show you this. This is something you probably all have seen on the internet. But this is the reason why I do things like that. I mean, one of the reasons, and let me share this with you really quickly. You've seen this, right?
Yep.
This whole thing. And, for people who don't know, what I'm getting at is, what you're saying about the white canvas and how it can just throw off all your values because you're working at the extreme of one place, black being the other extreme. The difference in, for you who know the answer, but obviously A is darker than B, and that's actually not the case. A and B are exactly the same value, meaning how dark and how light they are. And that's one of the reasons why you tone your canvas, is that you would just automatically think like your eyes lie to you, because it depends on, everything is relative to what's next to it. A and B are the exact same color. And that's the reason why I will tone something either brown or do an ébauche, which is that color painting, is to not, on my first layer, to not have this confuse me. And that's like, so if you tone it, at least to a medium or something, at least you could start judging things. And that's the thing, is that I could, all of us can probably just stain it and just go write the painting and write the finish, and that's fine. And that totally works. I've even noticed in my own work that if I do an underpainting, like a wash, like a wipeout, which is you stain it and see, the burnt umber, and then take out the lights and make some of the darks darker. Very simple. It's not exact. It's just a generalization. The thing I've noticed is that when I've done it a little bit more careful than I even allow myself, the painting becomes easier to do, because it's like, okay, like the values are in the ballpark. At least I'm not getting tricked as much in, oh, this is throwing off the whole painting, because the whole painting is connected. It's like a spider web. If one thing is completely off, it sort of pulls all the other stuff off in the same, but if everything is in its relative place, not only like first with your drawing and then with your values, you can figure out the rest. Then it becomes just small adjustments. The thing you don't want to do is to be like, whoa, that's completely off. So working on a white canvas could really just automatically throw off your eyes. That said, I know people who know that, and they'll be like, I want the white canvas there because I want the, and let's say oil painting, I want the light to go through the paint, hit the white canvas, and come back out of my eyes, so the painting becomes brighter. And that's like playing 3D chess, it's like you're thinking many moves ahead, and that's fine. But like, I always suggest tone your canvas. It makes everything much easier. It's hard enough. You don't want to make it harder.
Right. I knew you'd have a better answer.
Yeah, sorry. My nerdness and geekiness.
No way, man.
My street cred is like going out the window.
No, I love your knowledge, man. I wish I had as much as you.
Oh, stop!
I always learn stuff from you.
You're not even, you're forgetting the fact that we just scrolled through like so many of your amazing paintings. And I'm not just saying that because you're on it. Like, your paintings are extraordinary. And I look at your paintings, I'm in awe. So like, yeah. Both of you guys, actually. Yeah. I'm a big fan of yours too, Talia.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, thank you guys. Okay, let me ask a couple more questions, since I think they said there's only a few minutes left, or
oh no.
20.
Okay.
No demoing today, Greg.
Unless you want to demo in 5 minutes. I don't know.
No.
Or
I can't do anything in 5 minutes.
What's everyone's thoughts on self-portraits?
Nobody wants to see my ugly mug. I'm fine.
Or any, do you have any self-portraits, but it's like you in animal form or character form, maybe?
I've painted my son in many paintings. My oldest, Isaac, he's been in a lot of my paintings. Just because
the other one, you're like, whatever.
Yeah, for me, now I know my other one. No, I have plans for Everett. He's gonna be a superhero. But I wouldn't draw myself. I want to. Maybe one day I'll do it. Maybe when it makes sense. I don't like looking at my face as it is, so I don't want to paint it.
Well, what's funny, I think, with so much of our artwork, and I know this is going to be some artsy fartsy like response, but a lot of our art, they're self-portraits, like I would put in, the painting I did with the gumball and the bird, I'm the bird, like I put myself as the bird. But as far as like, the person who asked that is probably the traditional self-portrait. I think they're really good to do. I think that cheap model, if you're working from life, it's a really cheap model. So you just put up a mirror and just work on it. And you don't have to show anybody it. You just sit there and I say that for self-portraits. I say that with still lifes. Anything you could do to like study the form in front of you, whether it's a still life, which is really great because it's cheap. It's anything, grab anything, set it up, paint it. Self-portrait's a great way to do, the figure. And I also think it's kind of, and I agree with you. I don't want to look at myself. I hate looking at myself actually, but like, I think it's a good thing. I have a self-portrait. I've done several, but I had one here that I thought was just interesting, and I had it more in the graffiti section. But this was like, I did this
Yeah, I remember
a
that.
long time
I
ago.
know that one.
I know that
but
one.
it's called The Portrait of Sub, which is my alias.
Mhm.
And people would be like, well, how'd you do it from life if it's a
Side
profile? And and the way I did it is I set up 2 mirrors. So I had one mirror here and one mirror here, and you bounce it off and you can look and you can see your profile.
Wow.
So I did it like that. And the painting's only about that big. It's tiny.
Oh, wow.
But I did it about the size I saw it, which was about that big. And it was really interesting to do. And I thought it was interesting, since I was looking at myself conceptually, as looking at myself in a mirror, that I just saw it as me as a totally different person. So I just did my alias. I just did I approach it as like, I'm doing a portrait of this person I know really well, who's this graffiti guy who loves graffiti and was this total other person. So so that's why it's called Portrait of Sub and not a self-portrait, is that I was painting my nom de plume.
I love it.
You've done a lot of self-portraits.
Yeah,
Me?
Yeah.
I used to. I think I was in a group show that Sean Cheatham did.
Sean's
And then
awesome
I
artist.
realized I felt so douchey painting myself. And then I realized
Oh,
no, but then I realized, like, you know what? It's a painting that's some special in time and represents my
Yeah.
life. And then also, like, I don't care about messing myself up or changing, you know what I mean? As much as
Absolutely.
I sometimes
It's
still
it's
care
on.
about what the model thinks, or at least
Oh,
I used
you're
to
being
lot.
honest. And I think there's a thing where a lot of times when I'm painting people, I'm trying to make them like their best self.
Right.
I'm okay with putting all the weirdness of myself in there. It's a study in these, like, honesty.
Yeah. Well,
So
they
I
say
think-
painting is exploration. I mean, that's what we're doing when we're painting, exploring ourselves, exploring, like, learning about the rhino, like exploring your imagination, everything. So self-portrait is probably good for us.
I would suggest anybody who's interested in self-portraits conceptually is to read anything on Rembrandt. Because Rembrandt is, he did so many self-portraits, and you can see humanity in his eyes. You can see pain, you could see happiness. And like, if you just go through Rembrandt self-portraits, it is a masterclass of emotion painting, and maybe one of the best artists who ever walked the face of the planet. So that's a great way. I mean, that's where, when you look in the eyes, it's like, where's the art? It's like, look in the eyes. There's a book called Rembrandt's Eyes. Look in the eyes of a Rembrandt paint self-portrait and tell me that there isn't the most honest emotion you've ever seen in all of painting. So yeah, Rembrandt self-portraits are incredible.
it's a good challenge. Now you make me want to try one.
Do it.
I'd love to see.
I would too.
I'll just show you guys, nobody else.
Okay.
And
Deal.
the part.
Deal. I'd love that.
Yeah.
Everyone's saying this is awesome
I hope they
talent.
like it. Yeah.
Greg,
There's so much to talk about, and we're like, it's like,
I
Right.
know.
you only have a
we could go all night.
tiny bit of time.
Hey, Greg, did you do the album cover for Suburban's new album Hive? My daughter wants to know. Not me. This is from Ron Pierce.
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay, here's also for either of you, but it's about acrylic paint. Can you use a pouring acrylic paint in place of a higher flow acrylic paint for doing line work, for example, and for its coverage?
I'm not sure. A pouring acrylic. All I use is
Like
Nova
a
Ultra.
high flow acrylic or something, like a thinned out acrylic.
Oh, like high
I'm
viscosity?
thinking. Yeah.
Maybe. But all I would say is try it. Like anything else. Like, whenever people ask me painting techniques, a lot of times I was like, why don't you just go sit down and try it? Because you're going to find out pretty quickly. And that's what I had to do to figure out everything. Like every day I'm figuring something new out. And it's like, by making mistakes and just going, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to try it. And either works or it doesn't work. So I don't know.
I would guess, as long on a chemistry level, as long as there's a chemical bond between the acrylic that's on top of the, it should be more than fine. Acrylic is relatively open, that it probably will take it. The thing I wouldn't do is, you never paint acrylic on top of oil.
Exactly.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
But you can paint acrylic on top of acrylic, I think, until the cows come home.
Right.
Relative. I'm sure there's a
I don't think of acrylic
couple
as
of it is plastic.
Yeah.
It is.
And you
It's
could,
classic.
and I was like, a lot of times I put a coat of matte medium over whatever surface, especially if I used a lot of gloss paints, I'll put matte medium over it and just start painting again, and everything flows like butter.
Yeah. Matte medium's great. I actually put that, I use, well, it's not matte medium, but when I'm preparing my own canvases,
Yeah.
and actually I've talked to Courtney about this when they were, making panels and stuff, is that you can, what you want to do is you want to, like, if you're using high density fiberboard, or any wood, like panels, you can put a matte medium, or you put something, Golden's, PVA sizing, or Golden's makes something called GAC 100.
GAC. Yeah, I have some right here.
Yeah, and
that's
that's
what
what. So what you're doing is you're just sealing the wood for
Yep.
any impurities that won't come out.
That's right.
So you sealing that, and it's. I mean, generally it's acrylic. Matte medium can do the same, and what you're doing is you're sealing it, and then you can paint oil on top of that, and or you do your gesso, either traditional gesso or acrylic polymer gesso, and that's fine. But like, if you're doing that, if you're doing oil paint, I wouldn't do that. But an isolation layer that you're talking about, if you do that, like, you could just, like, back to the original question, you can just keep on going on top of that. The only thing I would say is allow enough time for proper drying, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Tony, you had a lot of process questions. So I guess your overall process, start to finish, and then how long do paintings take, estimation?
It depends. Obviously, on that big one, I spent about 2 years on that one. But I still like to do my drawings first, and then to figure it out, transfer my drawings either using an oil transfer or a graphite transfer. Then I'll either ink it or fix it with like a fixative. But I tried not to mix too many chemicals in any of my paintings. Back to that sort of making it very solid and archivally sound. But you could, if you use like a workable matte fixative, the resin in it, it'll be, I mean, you can read 19th century manuscripts and they used their version of it, but they just, instead of using an aerosol, they blew it on. They had these little straws, and they would just blow resin on it to seal the drawing. But anyway, I would seal my drawing, and then I do my underpainting, and then I usually work in layers. I'll use 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. That said, I've spent a lot of time drawing, and one of the advice I give to people is, like, if there's ever anything advice-wise, it's like, just draw more. Yeah. Like, I know even if they have painting advice, I'm like, just draw as much as you can, because that's the thing. So there's a fair amount of alla prima painting, which means I just dip my, blank canvas, dip it in thinned out paint, and just start blocking in the shapes and stuff like that. And then you just work it like that. And I do a lot of that with some of my
And then many of those layers are like scumbling and glazing.
Yeah. So what I'll end up doing is those layers, like that first layer, even my eboche that I was talking about, which is that colored underpainting, or the wipeout, or the brown sort of sepia. Sometimes I do a gray underpainting, because I pre-mix my colors. So I have several pre-mixed colors that I always use. So I'll do like a gray underpainting, and then I'll start. But even in my head, I think of that as an underpainting and not my first layer. And in a way, psychologically, it makes me not nervous to go over it. So even my first layer, I'm like, oh, this is my first layer. So in a way, it sort of takes the pressure off myself. Mm-hmm. So I'll paint in layers pretty opaquely to sort of like sculpt. What I'm trying to do is sculpt in the beginning. And then once I feel like I got the overall sculpture, the value structure of it, later layers, I'll do some glazing and scumbling. And scumbling would be just pretty much putting a veil, like a dry brush over a dry area. Or glaze is when you do the same thing, but you add a little bit more medium to it, and it kind of gives it this like glossy effect. And you can do several layers of that, and you can get this incredible feeling of like you could see through it, like layers. It looks rich and deep. And honestly, I do that really just to get to the point where I can then focus in on that last layer and just tweak details, and then sort of sit there and just do as much or as little detail as hopefully I, whatever the painting calls for. In a way, just to sort of finish this up, is a lot of people are like, oh, you do super detailed paintings. And I'm like, not necessarily. I do. That's not my goal. My goal is to make something that's in my head and put it on the canvas. It happens to be that that's where it goes. So I don't consider myself like a really detailed painter. That's just the result of my exploration. It just means that I'm going and just trying to figure this thing out. My intent isn't to do a super detailed painting. I know that sounds weird considering some of my paintings, but I'm like, it's not my goal. My goal is to get this thing out of my head. And it just happens to be that that's the way it kind of looks right to me. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Are there areas of like thick and thin in your paintings because they look so even, or do you try to keep it? Okay.
Yeah. I really actually, if anything, there are times when I've gone in there being like, I'm totally going to like blast this thing out thick and this area is super thin, and I do it. And I come back the next day and it all equals out. And I was like, I didn't do that. But in some weird way, like my paintings like even out more than I want. I think using certain mediums that give you a more of an impasto and stuff can help. Yeah. And I do a little bit, but I'd like to, the times I've pushed it, I've always loved the results. Mm-hmm. And some of the work I love a lot. Like Natalia, I love how you handle your paint. And I look at other people's paintings and I'm like, oh man, I got to do some of that. Like, look how they like the paint looks like paint. It looks like it's singing, it's like it's thick and
I feel the same about yours.
But I do like to play with texture because I feel like you should see art in person.
Yeah.
I'm a little weirded out by like the computer and I know we're all on Instagram and we all do it. And it's fine. And I've seen so much stuff I would never come across because of places like Instagram and all that, which is great. But I've also seen things that look amazing on Instagram. And when you see them in real life, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't look so good. So I paint for it to be seen in person. So sometimes you don't get that in a photo. And I don't think my paintings necessarily look that good in photographs. I think they look much better in person because that's what they were painted.
Mine. And both of yours would be best to see in person. And even Greg, the scale of yours.
I know.
But we're grateful for Instagram and internet.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited that I could see so much stuff, but I do think that everybody should go out and see real art in person with your eyes and not through the screen.
Yeah.
Like if you, Greg, you have a show up, right? Is your show still up?
Yeah, it's up right now. It's Go Outside. It's at KP Project Gallery in Los Angeles. And it's up until the 4th of June.
I'll post the details.
So it's up right now in LA.
Yeah.
You need to see this. Like if you're in LA, go out and see art.
My largest, most complicated painting I've done to date is up in it. So if anybody wants to see it.
Oh, yes.
And then it's going home to Australia.
Wow. Okay. I'm posting the details. Oh, and Greg, question from Larry Waybright.
Okay.
When you start blending, are you approaching with speed while being light-handed, or are you going super slow and light as a feather?
Yes. Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I can't. That's a hard question to answer. I don't think about it. I really see. When people ask me ever to teach a class or something, I'm always in there going, I don't know, I'll just do it, because I don't think about the process while I'm doing it. All right, put it down, take either a damp brush, blend it. I'm not thinking how much pressure I'm putting down or how much I'm just painting it. I guess I'm better suited just painting and less teaching when people always ask me, but I do the seminars I do. It's basically me just sitting there painting. Everybody watch. I'm going to do this next thing. I'm going to do this next thing. And we'll tell stories and stuff during the seminars. They always turn out great and people learn stuff. But I couldn't answer that question with I've used about this much pressure. And then it's not a bad question, to be honest.
Super intuitive, right? I'm sure both of you painting so long and often. I didn't know how to answer questions like this until I started teaching. I never knew what I did because I just did it.
Yeah. I'm usually thinking about, oh man, what are the kids doing? Do I have to leave to go pick them up for school? Or man, I want to make dinner tonight. Should I have shrimp? That sounds good. And my head's just going in all different places. I'm not thinking about, maybe it's a little bit of ADD in me too, that gets channeled into the painting. And I just have this big storm going on in my head every time I'm painting or drawing or just all day. I don't know. I'm weird.
I think you said it exactly. When I started teaching, it really changed a lot in communication. Because again, I think we're all, as artists, I think all of us have a little bit of that sort of introvert type of thing. And when it was like forced to be like the certain things I just kind of knew how to do because I don't know. I don't know. I had to like, I was too insecure to be like, I can't just say that. It'll make me look like an idiot. So I had to like figure out why. And I think teaching made me so much better, like as an artist, because it really forced me to figure stuff out, to try to communicate it. So, yeah, I get it. You know, it's like, sometimes you're just like, I don't know. You just kind of do it. You just got to do this thing and it works. Hey, do you mind if I ask a question that I just saw up on the chat? I didn't realize the chat was on this side. To both of you, is it difficult to part with your paintings? From Sandra?
Oh, usually if it's, sometimes they're my babies, especially if it's of my daughter or something special and meaningful. I've gotten better, but it can be.
I feel the second I get my good high-res photograph, like I go and I get a giant scan. I just get the highest quality scan I can. And I know I'm going to put in a book or a magazine or make prints of it. I'm just as happy to have a book full of my paintings. I love putting books out. I think I have about 6 books.
Wow.
I count the stop motion movie book that we did. And I get so stoked seeing my stuff in a book. That's where I'm happiest, to have the collection and books and stuff, that because people can buy a print, they have that one, but you buy a book and you just got hundreds you're usually like 300-page books I put out, and you got pages of art in it. And I'm like, that's where I get stoked. So I can part with the piece knowing it's going into a book and it's going to be able to be seen by tons of people, and they get to share, enjoy it. And I get to look at it whenever I want to. It's like having a photo album, like, oh, I remember that, but I don't have room for the paintings. So I have to part with them.
Yeah.
It's funny is that it almost goes back to what caused you to start doing this in the first place. You were talking about books and all the books that you were looking at as a kid, and in a weird way, you're creating those for yourself. Yeah. You're doing these amazing paintings, but then you're getting to collect it and look at it in the same spirit as,
I'm doing painting.
How this started
too. Yeah, it did start in books. And you notice a lot of the paintings I do, they have books in it that have portals into those worlds. Like you could fall into them. So yeah, books. Yeah, I guess it does hold a big thing in my work.
I love that. And knowing it, I think sometimes for me also, knowing it's going to go to a good home, especially if I meet the collectors, that feels really good.
Absolutely.
I know for me that I learned to kind of look forward to them going somewhere. Like even if I've worked months on this painting or something, and it gets bought, like you were saying, by a good collector, it makes me really proud to know that somebody is willing. And I don't know if this is like this self-deprecation thing, but that somebody would be willing to buy my work, to say that in a way, it was like, I'm honored. Like, I'm really honored that you care so much that you would actually buy this painting with your hard-earned money that I worked really hard on. And in a way, I saw that as this, like, let me say this, in a perfect world, if I didn't have to, like, we didn't have bills and all that to pay, like, I would give my paintings to my friends. Or the people who really appreciate it, in a perfect world, because I want the people to appreciate them. So for me, and honestly, like, and then when I started thinking about it in a logical way, I was like, I do this thing and I'm really proud of it. Even if it's not my best painting, I'm proud of it because I worked on it and it's the best I could do at that time. Does it mean that's the best I can do? No, not at all. At that time, it was like, it's what it was. And then it goes off and it goes into somebody's home. And then they love it, hopefully. And I get a check, and it allows me to do the next painting, that I can revisit this idea of the process that I'm trying to figure out and trying to perfect, or trying to search. It allows me to search. And I don't know, there's this weird sort of relationship with that I'm become comfortable with, And I think a lot of it is just that if it goes somewhere and it's kind of loved, I'm like, I'm okay. Like, push it, go to where it needs to go. And I think I'm okay with that.
Awesome. And inspires you to make more.
Right.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, you guys.
Ah!
I know. Well, we should probably thank Trekell and maybe mention your favorite products or what we recommend or what we use, maybe what you
I
guys
use the golden Taklon brushes. They're my favorite. So I definitely love all of them. Filbert's rounds, but I really like the dagger brushes, which we came up with together. And you could do all kinds of fun tricks with them.
Do you guys ever use brushes when you're like painting walls? Stupid question.
Yeah, sometimes.
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, more recently, not before, but now I will. I'll be like, oh, it's good. A little more highlights in there. Yeah.
I'm loving the Crimson Taklons that I helped develop with Trekell. I was looking for a perfect brush that was like really gave me that spring back. I wanted it to be synthetic because save the animals.
Thank you.
But wanted it to be synthetic. That I cared a lot about that. But I think it holds its shape really, and I wanted something that kind of holds its shape. I generally use filberts and rounds. And what I do sometimes with rounds, let me show you something I do. Even though I use filberts, and I would have demoed this, but I use a lot of rounds too. If you could see this, I do a lot more pressure sensitive. So if I take a black paint, let's go extreme, and I press really hard, it'll be black. But if I take black paint and I press really hard and then ease up on my pressure, I can almost do it so it's like a middle value blue gray. So and I do that with all my brushes, and I start off with Crimson Taklons. I end up and I finish off with the golden Taklons. I think that's for me a perfect combination. Crimson Taklons for most of the painting, for the heavy duty stuff, and then golden Taklons to sort of bring everything together. But what I do is a lot of times is like I'll swirl my round, and then there's paint on this. If I push down on my palette, it almost becomes like a filbert. It kind of does that.
Yep.
And then I can sort of it almost becomes this like mini fan brush, and I can really do incredible amount of subtlety without doing anything fancy. It's just how hard and how soft you push on the brush. But generally speaking, filberts, rounds are my choice with the Crimson Taklons and the golden Taklons. I love just that combination. Oh, and the liner, the new liner brushes, the protege, not the protege, the proteges.
Yeah.
Those are incredible for detail. I mean, they go to a tiny point. Those are pretty amazing. All different sizes.
And you get some brush cleaner while you're at it. So treat your brush as well. Put that coconut oil on it at the end.
And when you wash them,
coconut soap.
place them down like this. Don't do this.
Right.
While they're drying, push them like this. This is how you let them dry flat. Let them dry flat.
Yeah, and the restorer is amazing.
Yeah, the restore is good.
Yeah.
So
Tony,
do
you reshape yours, or you just wash them and lay them flat?
Yeah, I'll go like this. I'll do this, squeeze out the water.
Yeah.
And then I'll put a little bit of the restorer on it, do that, lay them flat. And then, when you buy a new brush and it's hard,
that's why
you break that. That's what the restorer does. It almost creates that first look. And if you take care of your brushes, they'll last a long time.
Yeah.
One thing I try to do actually is, if I know I'm going to paint every day for the week, I don't wash my brushes every day. What I'll do is I'll take some safflower oil or some poppy oil, and after I clean my brushes in a little bit of mineral spirits, I'll dip it in safflower oil or poppy oil, squeeze it out, and just leave it. By tomorrow, it'll still be wet. It'll be fine. So I try to clean my brushes maybe once a week.
Yeah.
If you know it's the same brush you're going to use next day, you can clean it, either put the tip in oil, leave it in there, or just put in safflower. Again, this is oil painting, I'm sorry, or poppy oil.
Yeah.
Put that, shape it, leave it. If you're going to use it tomorrow, you're good to go. They'll be fine. So try not to wash them too much.
Right.
Awesome tip.
I used to
Natalia, thank you
with
so much. Greg, I love both of you guys.
Love you
too, man.
I'm
Yeah.
really honored not only to be friends with you, but to be able to see your paintings. You know, let me say this. I think art matters. I think we should make more art. You know, there should be more art in this world, and you know, go out there and make some, because not only am I am an artist, but I'm a huge fan of art. So I love to see art out there, and I really admire both your work so much.
Yeah, I just echo that. You guys are both awesome. I'm glad we were able to do this. Thank you, Courtney at Trekell, for bringing us together to have this little chit chat.
It's super fun.
And there should
Yeah.
be more
Greg.
shop talks.
Thank you, Caldo. You guys are amazing.
Yes.
It's so cool. Your work is so different, but so similar and same influences. And then your graffiti, it's just like magic. And then you guys have such a strong studio practice. You're so inspirational. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you, Trekell.
Greg, since I have you on the line, next time I'm in LA, you down to paint a wall?
Yeah, we have to. We've been
I
talking
want
about
to
it for
watch.
years.
I know, but stay tuned. I'm going to probably make I'm going to make some time out soon to come out to LA. So
All right, let's do it. We have to. Have to.
Yay.
What
Okay.
happened?
Oh, and you got everyone pay attention to Trekell's page and everything for upcoming Zoom demos and webinars. I'm sad we missed a demo from Tony. That would have been so cool to see.
We'll do another. I'll do one soon. I have all the like camera stuff, so now I can do it here and not have to like travel.
Awesome.
Greg, do you want to give your home address in case you want any letters from anyone?
Oh,
No.
sure. Okay. I live in, where do you live, Tony? No more of those.
yeah, it's weird stuff.
Yeah.
Go see Greg's show.
you,
And Natalia,
everybody.
please let us know. You know if you're going to be showing or anything.
I
soon.
will. I know. Same thing as you. Commissions, and then I'm
And then
doing
I'm
new
free.
stuff. Yes.
Free.
Yes.
So I look forward to seeing all that stuff.
Thank you.
You're
guys.
beautiful. Take care of each other. You're all amazing.
Yay.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you,
Bye,
everybody, for tuning
Thank you,
in.
everybody.
Awesome. Are we still recording?